This is a point that I really want people to get. Inhibiting aromatase with an aromatase inhibitor or DHT derivative, like powerful one like Masteron, is not the same thing as estrogen lowering down to like your set point naturally. And here's the case in point. People can take AIs and get their estrogen from 55 to 30 and they lose their libido and erections become hit or miss. Then though, they lower their test dose like 100, 120 milligrams a week with a little bit of HEG. The estrogen falls in that same range and libido and erections are amazing. Why is this the case? Has anyone else seen this? Am I crazy? Truth is, I'm not crazy. I've seen it countless times. And I'm going to explain to you the core difference between estrogen regulation and how that affects the sexual system, and estrogen suppression. These things are different, and the TRT community needs to start acknowledging this. How are we this far in the land of TRT content and clinics that are educating people and prescribing testosterone, prescribing AIs, and responsible for people's success on protocols, but we haven't determined that there's a difference between lowering estrogen via an aromatase inhibitor and suppressing an enzyme versus lowering it naturally and how that affects the whole system. Sit back, my friends, grab a beer. Let's get into it. All right, in the meantime, really quickly before we start, look, Cortex Labs is a TRT guidance, sexual dysfunction resolution, and performance optimization company. The primary thing that we do is help people get out of bad TRT protocols and fix them, specifically around libido and erections. I'm the guy that gets the calls and the coaching from people who are having sexual issues on HRT. Let's get it fixed. You can either do a one-off call with me or a longer-term package. Sometimes the time is worth it, boys. Believe me, if you've got the budget, please book me. I built a nootropic stack that is not for the faint of heart. Very strong. Take 2 capsules, brain turns on, unlike any other compound that is out there in the market. You can buy it down in the description of this video. You'll love it. All right. Give me this. Let's begin. So the bottom line in the dynamic I want you to look at here is the core difference, right? Imagine there's a core difference between regulation of aromatase, which would happen via lowering a test dose, just getting a test dose down kind of low in a spot where estrogen ends up at 30 or 35, whatever your sweet spot is naturally, versus suppression of aromatase. These are two different things. When you lower testosterone, as an example, there's less substrate. There's just less actual fuel for aromatase. So then you get proportionately lower estrogen as a result. But if you use an aromatase inhibitor and inhibit an enzyme, you get disruption of the enzyme itself, right? Which is in the hypothalamus, various other regions of your brain, in penile tissue. Aromatase is everywhere. So the difference isn't just, and this is how people mess this up because they think about it so simply, the difference isn't just how much estrogen is in the body. It's how it's made, where it's made, and whether or not it reaches target tissues and in what quantity. This is the real nuance. Let's talk about natural lowering of estradiol. When you lower your testosterone dose, just as an example, to 100, 120 milligrams or something, then aromatase keeps functioning normally, just as it would. Like there's no inhibition or disruption of the enzyme aromatase, which is everywhere. And it functions organically in all tissues including the brain, the testes, the endothelium, and in the fat tissue. The ratio of test to estrogen stays intact if you just lower your test dose and then estrogen lowers naturally. Your body is doing what it's supposed to do, regulating the testosterone to estradiol ratio. So you still get mood benefits. Like if you crash your estrogen or inhibit aromatase with an AI, like you might notice your mood's a little fucked up. You still get the neurological side of having enough aromatase converting testosterone into estradiol, so you get libido and dopamine modulation. And since you do need estrogen, like somewhat of a consistent stream or a balanced TDE ratio in the penis for nitric oxide signaling, you still get, with a lower test dose and naturally estrogen falling in that sweet spot, a penile endothelial optimization, which equals better erections. When you're just lowering your test dose to get lower estrogen, you're not blocking the system. You're just feeding it less substrate, less testosterone to be converted to estradiol. But aromatase inhibitors equal regional suppression and disruption. Tissue-specific aromatase, like the brain, for example, which we know in the clinical literature that a brain aromatase is necessary for libido. Well, that gets blunted and starved if you just fucking block the enzyme, right? You know, there's no continuous stream, albeit lower, of conversion of test to estrogen. You've blocked it. Like, you've stopped it. Guess where aromatase is expressed, where it matters. Number one, the hypothalamus. Okay, this is a sex function, sexual function, libido function specific or important region of the brain. Two, the amygdala, and different areas of the brain like the amygdala and the hippocampus, which are a little less relevant to this, but somewhat relevant. But importantly, the medial preoptic area of the brain, which we know is the primary region of the brain where the libido sits, medial preoptic area of the hypothalamus. Some people can tolerate this, and it's absolutely fine, right? So this isn't for everybody. And aromatase inhibitors, by the way, completely work, and there's plenty of guys that I've worked with that use AIs. They got their dose. It works fucking phenomenally for them, and that's that. But not everybody this is the case. When this happens, what I think happens, the aromatase inhibitor cuts off at the penile tissue level all the local aromatase, you know? Whereas again, if you just lowered your testosterone to 100 milligrams a week, you'd still have that local aromatase happening to support nitric oxide and penile endothelial function. Whereas if you cut off the enzyme at the penile tissue, you get a temporary period of starvation of the conversion of test to estrogen, and then the balance gets thrown off. If your body doesn't know how to properly regulate in response to an AI, which some bodies don't for whatever reason, the response is going to be very disproportionate and dysregulated. So estrogen, the primary point I want to make in this is that estrogen, it's more than just a number. It's a signal that relies on pulsatility, timing, and tissue access. Like, an aromatase inhibitor equals a flat line of aromatase. This is abnormal pharmacology. And this is why, right? Because you're getting tissue-specific starvation of the conversion of test to estradiol. You get like mood flatness, you can get dry eyes, you can get a complete numbness in the male organ, just a numbing of it. You can get emotional detachment. You get climax delay. This happens very, very often when you've disrupted aromatase for these people that are very sensitive to this. But importantly, as we've all come to know, you get joint pain. Even if estrogen's at 35. If you took it from 55 to 35 with some aromasin and you have joint pain, it's like, why the fuck's that happening? It's because aromatase is being cut off at the joint level. The other thing about AIs that tend to destroy people for this subset of individuals that take aromatase inhibitors is that estrogen is still metabolizing out of your system. Like, you still urinate estrogen out, and you're still going to go through the liver and otherwise processes by which you clear estrogen from the body. So if you're inhibiting it with aromatase inhibitor, that's not the whole picture. You're still getting consistent lowering of estrogen via clearance of estrogen. So you end up losing more estrogen than you even fucking bargained for, and you're inhibiting the enzymes, at the tissue specific level, which disrupts the whole balance. This is why you'll have TRT people that are saying, like, they're sort of implying that the lab numbers on estradiol lie, right? Because they kind of do. Like, the serum isn't the whole picture. It's never been the whole picture. In the context of using an AI, as an example, the serum is less of the picture because you're cutting off aromatase at all these tissues. So it really does matter. If we could measure, which we can, and in the scientific literature, they admit that this quandary exists where we can't actually measure estradiol at the tissue level. If we could, we could actually see, oh my God, like penile tissue starved of estrogen, brain tissue, amygdala, medial preoptic area of the hypothalamus, which is responsible for libido. This is now for some 7 to 24 or 48 hour period, depending on how you respond to aromatase inhibitors, being starved of actual tissue specific estradiol. So let me give you some practical takeaways now that we've established that inhibiting aromatase is not the same as naturally having estrogen fall in the sweet spot. And that this is why people take AIs or DHT derivatives like Masteron, powerful ones, or even Brimabalin, and their estrogen is in a reasonable place and they don't have libido or erections. Now you understand why. It's about the tissues. And blocking enzymes disrupts the balance. For all intents and purposes on TRT, there are two types of people. People that can take AIs and their body distributes the estrogen evenly. There's a little bit of aromatase action, but there's not full inhibition, and estrogen ends up in a sweet spot and everything functions normally. And these people ride off into the sunset and they have a great time. You know, a lot of us that can't really tolerate a lot of AI or it's harder to dial in, like we wish we were like that. I wish everyone was like that. It'd be easier to just, have someone run a couple 100 milligrams of test and take 0.25 milligrams of anastrozole once a week. So there's people that can do that, right? So you have those types. And then you have people for whatever reason, like aren't distributing the estradiol and the aromatase activity in a proportional way in response to an AI. So they have to run lower doses of tests and use a non-aromatizable androgen, possibly Proviron, physique optimization benefits. But, if you're really interested in anabolism, it'd be something like Anavar. If you've tried the other route of running a pretty high dose of test and you like that, you like the anabolism, you like the energy, you like the confidence, you like all that DHT, you like the masculinity. I mean, you like going to the fucking gym and killing it every single day or 6 days a week and not being tired. Guess what, man? I like that too. But if you've tried everything on that front and you just can't get yourself to respond appropriately to the reduction of estradiol via the inhibition of aromatase, you're going to have to do the strategy that I've talked about recently, that I talked about on Ryan Root's podcast, the live stream like last week or so. You dose a lower modest dose of test and you use, if you have to, a non-aromatizable androgen on top of that, and preferably have some HCG in your protocol. Again, as I've said before, like if you go down to 100 milligrams a week of tests, you're going to be able to tolerate more HCG, and it's not going to take your estrogen over the sweet spot. Some people in this case aren't going to need some Anavar with it. Maybe your anabolism and your ability to build muscle is just fine at 100 milligrams a week. Are you going to look fucking super saucy? No, I mean, not necessarily. Are you still going to look great and be vascular, assuming you're lean and you work out, and you're eating right for you? Yes. So you don't always have to add like Anavar on top of that. You can if you want. That's an option. It's really not going to mess with libido one way or the other, and usually it makes libido a little better. But for some people, they're just not going to need that. So the strategy is, if you have these two people, right, can take aromatase inhibitors, body distributes the estrogen fine, the inhibition of aromatase is fine, assuming there's still some aromatase action. There's enough access to the tissue level of estrogen via that extra aromatase that's still there, but not like an oversaturated amount of estradiol. And they're perfect, man. But those who don't, for the reasons I explained, okay, regulation of estradiol via lowering tests and having it fall naturally is very different than suppression of an enzyme which distributes estrogen at its own rate in its own timing. If you're one of those people that responds pretty negatively to that latter situation, you have no choice. You have no choice. Lower dose of test, okay? The amount of test that keeps everything good, but estrogen's in your sweet spot. And if there's anything else that you're missing in your protocol at that point, in terms of anabolism, energy, all the other benefits, well, then you just got to bring other compounds in. And there are plenty of them, not just Anavar, a whole list of stuff. You get to now experiment with more shit. You get to find other stuff that might work. You get to do the fun work of bringing some other things in, right, to try to compensate for what you may be losing by just going on a lower test dose. So I hope you guys get the point. Major point is, lowering aromatase or lowering estrogen naturally, just having it regulate via a dropping of a test dose, as an example, or just having a modest test dose, generally speaking, is a substantially different picture at the tissue level than inhibiting aromatase enzymes with a drug. Now, you have a scientific explanation and hopefully some sort of visual representation of why AIs crash your libido even when the estrogen isn't crashed. And now you know what to do about it. This channel is about giving you tools to dial in properly on TRT. I hate it when a guy's not dialed in. I deal with this all the time. It is what I do. I've seen all manner of situations, and I'm here to give you the goods. Listen, this is what I do for a living, but this is what I do for kind of a passion project as well. I'm a coach on TRT, specifically relative to libido and erections, but all of this has to do with all of these dynamics that we talked about. Estrogen is it's the biggest key player in a TRT protocol, period, right? If it's too high, it's problematic. If it's too low, it's problematic. If it's inhibited by an aromatase and your gene expression, brain, estrogen distribution doesn't agree with that, you're going to have problems. But think about how many distinctions I've made like this over the years. This is why people seek me out for TRT coaching. Book me, all right? We've got a one-off call. That'll get you some good success. But for people that have serious sexual dysfunction, and listen, if you've got the budget, I mean, just skip the bullshit and hire me for a 3-month or a 6-month package. I mean, when I have time with you and we can really go over a lot of this, and we have adequate time to dial you in like a Greek god on HRT, this is when we get the best results. You can book me for any of that stuff in under a minute at livecortex.com. We'll be on the fact-finding call as soon as tomorrow. Otherwise, before talking about HRT, I was one of the world's foremost experts in the neuropharmacology of nootropics around performance enhancement for business people. After all that experience, I built one myself. It is called Torque. It is exceptionally strong. You can buy a bottle of this stuff and have it shipped to your doorstep in under 2 days, right down below in the description or at livecortex.com. I think you're going to love it. Well, all right. Give me this. Brother, it has been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you. Hope you're having a great day. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Like the video. Makes a huge difference. Would really mean a lot to me if you would just hit that like button. Sub to the channel. Many more breakdowns like this, which I think a lot of other YouTubers are not doing, especially around libido and sexual function. Everybody has their specialty. You know, this is what we talk about here. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. Hit that sub button. Otherwise, kick ass, rock on. Thanks for being with me. Hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you boys on the next one.